Forget about your Ektorp sofas, your flower-borne shelves, your Tornviken kitchen stands, and the fact that I definitely pronounced those names correctly. Forget about all those things, because the best part of IKEA isn't the cheap furniture, the wonderful assembly instructions, or those tasty meatballs. The best part of IKEA is this, a toilet. What it do? I'm Lumi, and welcome to the Benchtop, where we explore our plastic planet. Except this episode, we're worried about a different planet crisis. Ooh, is it climate change? No. Is it overpopulation? No. Is it Yellowstone exploding, filling our atmosphere with ash, plunging us into darkness and killing us through cold and hunger? It's water, bro. It's water. As I was trying to say, water is obviously a big deal, and you probably don't need a chemist like me to tell you that. Our planet's surface is 71% water, and like many of the living things on this blue rock, we are mostly made of water too, about 60% if you want to be specific. Water is all around us, and so much of what we call life depends on it. That's why it's one of the main things we look for when searching for life in our space backyard. But the weird thing is, despite having all this water around us, you often hear we don't have enough of it. But why? This is sugar. Actually, it's 3 grams of sugar. This represents how much fresh water we have on Earth total. That includes things like rivers, lakes, glaciers, and ice caps. All of it. So this 3 grams of sugar represents not just the water we use for drinking, but for growing food, washing cars, and doing bottle flip challenges. We are weird creatures. Anyways, this is the rest of the water on Earth. It's about 120 grams of sugar if you're wondering how they compare. As you can see, of all the water we have on Earth, only a small fraction of it is usable without having to resort to some clever engineering to turn some of this into this. And while it is possible to do this conversion, they definitely have their drawbacks, which is another episode for another day. Having such a small amount of fresh water available to us means we have to use it wisely, especially when you consider population growth, which means we need more water for those people to drink, more food for them to eat, more episodes for them to drop a like on, and more energy for them to use that's often produced using fresh water. But the issue with water isn't just the fact that we don't have a ton of it. It's actually more complicated than that. Believe it or not, more than half of the world's usable fresh water is located in about 7 countries, which means everyone else has to rely on either importing their water or using alternative methods for producing water. But even countries with lots of fresh water may not even have enough for themselves. For instance, China accounts for about 18% of the world's population, but only has about 7% of the world's renewable fresh water. Not very balanced at all. So what does all this water talk have to do with IKEA toilets? Well, as our need for water increases, we have to think of new ways to use less of it. Enter waterless toilets. I went to IKEA a few weeks ago to get those shelves you see right behind me. I've been to IKEA before, but this time I did something I never do. Use a public restroom. That's because public restrooms are usually nightmare fuel, but I was pleasantly surprised this one was actually quite clean. But what was even more surprising was the urinal. It wasn't the regular pull handle I was used to, and it also wasn't the fancy one with the sensor. In fact, it didn't flush at all. It was a waterless urinal, which blew my mind. A urinal that didn't flush, but also didn't smell. What sort of witchcraft was this? Being the nerd that I am though, I immediately left the restroom after washing my hands and furiously Googled to figure out how these things worked. It wasn't long until I realized that I actually was late to the party because waterless toilets are nothing new. They've actually been around since the early 1990s, and they take advantage of 2 properties of chemistry: miscibility and density. You've probably seen an oil and water demonstration before, but if not, let me show you now. In this beaker, I have some oil, and that oil is obviously yellow. In the second beaker, I have some water that I colored red to make it easier to see. If I slowly add this red water to this beaker of oil, you see something peculiar happening. The oil and water don't mix and the water sinks to the bottom. This is exactly how waterless urinals work too. Oil and water are what's called immiscible. This means that oil and water do not mix when put in the same container. The water molecules like to stick with each other, and the oil ones like to do so too. When your urine enters the toilet, it flows down into a space called a trap due to gravity. Once in the trap, the urine meets an immiscible liquid, which means your urine and that liquid don't like to mix, just like this oil and water. Since the water is also more dense than this immiscible liquid, it sinks to the bottom where it can either be drained or siphoned out. That less dense liquid continuously floats on top of the urine, preventing the smells from exiting and keeping that IKEA bathroom smelling nice and clean. But how much water does this all save? IKEA doesn't list exactly how much water their toilets save on their website, but urinals typically use between 1 to 3 gallons of water every flush. In the US, urinals account for about 160 billion gallons of water every year, so waterless toilets could actually save a lot of water. But the question is, if they've been around since the 90s, why haven't all urinals become waterless? Well, there's actually a few reasons for that. For one, they used to be illegal. Despite being invented back in 1991, waterless toilets had a few hurdles to jump through, as people thought they would be unsafe, unsanitary, and allow toxic gases to seep up from sewers. That's why they were illegal to install in the US, since they weren't approved through building codes. It wasn't until 2006 that waterless toilets were allowed to be installed, and since then, many places have made the switch. And honestly, they're kind of a no-brainer. Waterless toilets use less water, can be installed pretty much anywhere a regular urinal is, are safer since they encourage less bacteria growth, people who use them subscribe to this channel, and they're cleaner since they don't spray your hands or clothes with urine mist after flushing. While IKEA isn't the first company out there using waterless toilets, it's definitely cool to see them adopting this newer technology. And as more places do the same, hopefully we can flush some of our water issues down the drain, one urinal at a time. But I have some questions for you. Have you ever used or seen a waterless urinal before? Did you already know how they work? And am I weird for making an episode about urinals? Let me know your answers in the comments down below, and don't forget to drop a like on this episode while you're down there. Thanks for watching, I'm Lumi, and remember, keep thinking.